They dragged her from the wagon before the sun could wake, her bare feet cutting on gravel, her breath breaking like thin glass in the cold. The desert was still half asleep, its silence torn open by the sound of chains clinking against wood. A circle of men stood around the rough platform, their shadows long and crooked, their eyes glittering with something meaner than hunger. At the center, the woman knelt, wrists bound, hair tangled with dust. 28 years of living, and none had been kind. The preacher cleared his throat, voice trembling through the dry air as he announced the debt owed to the town for harboring the stray. They called her that, the stray, as if she were some animal that wandered too close to their fire. The crowd leaned closer when she lifted her head. There was defiance in the set of her jaw, though fear trembled beneath it. She had the kind of beauty that looked accidental, as if carved by grief instead of grace. And though her lips were cracked, her voice was steady when she spoke. They'll sell me at dawn, but I can cook, stitch, clean. I'll be anything you need. The plea slid through the air like smoke, soft and haunting. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone spat near her feet. Someone else said she wasn't worth even the $1 painted on the signboard above her. Among them stood a man with eyes the color of worn leather, 35, weather-bitten, the sort of man who looked like he'd stopped believing in anything a long time ago. He wore his silence like armor. They called him Luke, the cowboy who once lost a wife to winter and a farm to fire. He hadn't meant to stop that morning. He'd come only to trade feed and leave. But when her voice broke the quiet, it cut through him like the echo of something he'd buried deep, a sound that reminded him of mercy. The auction began without ceremony. The preacher barked out a price, and coins clattered like gunfire. The woman stared at the horizon instead of the men. When the bidding slowed, Luke stepped forward. "1 coin," he said. "Just 1. The crowd jeered, but no one offered more. Perhaps because she frightened them, or because they knew she'd bring nothing but trouble. The preacher slammed his palm down. "Sold." Luke climbed the platform, fingers brushing the iron cuffs. They were cold and heavy, biting into her skin. For a moment, she didn't breathe as he unlocked them. Her wrists fell free, pale bands marked where metal had lived too long. She didn't thank him, didn't know if she should. He didn't wait for gratitude. He just nodded toward his horse. "Come on," he murmured. Before they changed their minds. They rode in silence. The land stretched wide and empty, a canvas of red dust and sky. She watched the trail behind them more than the road ahead. Every hoofbeat sounded like an echo of something lost. Luke didn't ask her name. He only said she could stay at his cabin until she figured where she meant to go. She didn't answer. Words had cost her too much already. At the cabin, the air smelled of cedar and smoke. She stood by the doorway, unsure if she was guest or ghost. Luke poured water into a basin, left it near the fire. "For your hands," he said. Her fingers trembled as the warmth seeped through. That night, she slept on a cot near the window, watching the stars. When dawn brushed the horizon, she rose before him and began to sweep the floor. By noon, she'd mended his torn sleeve, baked cornbread, and humming low, stitched a patch into the curtain torn by wind. She moved quietly, as if afraid the walls might reject her. Days passed like whispers. She spoke little, but each gesture built a bridge, slow, careful, made of ordinary kindness. Luke began to linger near her song in the evenings. Once, he asked what it meant. She told him it was a lullaby for those who'd lost their way home. He said nothing, but that night, he dreamed of a woman walking through smoke with a feather in her hand. By the 3rd week, the town had begun to talk. Men at the saloon called her his property. Women at the well called her his shame. The sheriff stopped by one morning, hat in hand, eyes heavy with pity. "You can't save everyone, Luke," he said quietly. The words hit harder than the wind. She heard them from the kitchen doorway, and her heart folded in on itself like old paper. That evening, when the sun turned blood orange, she sat at the riverbank with her sewing kit. Thread between her fingers, she stitched something small and white, a feather pattern into a square of cloth. It was the shape of thanks, of farewell. She laid it on the table beside his cup before dawn, the thread still warm from her touch. When Luke woke, the room felt hollow. The chair empty. The silence loud. The door hung open, wind sighing through. Outside, the dust carried her footprints away toward the ridge. He ran, boots kicking up gold light, but she was already gone. Only the feather cloth remained, trembling in the morning breeze like the ghost of a promise. He stood there a long while, eyes burning against the sun. The chains were gone, yet somehow, he felt the weight of them on his own heart. And somewhere beyond the horizon, a faint hum drifted through the wind, her lullaby, carried by distance and fate. The rain came hard that night, slicing through the plains like a whip. Luke rode beneath it, soaked through to the bone, chasing ghosts through the mud. Weeks had passed since she left, and still he followed every rumor, every whisper of a woman with braids and a voice like wind. Sometimes he thought he saw her in the distance, walking beside the road, only for the vision to dissolve into fog. His horse staggered beneath him, exhausted, but Luke kept on. He couldn't name what drove him, guilt, love, or the stubborn ache of unfinished mercy. The desert, once wide and hollow, had begun to feel like punishment. He found her trail near the canyon crossing, faint prints half swallowed by rain. Someone at a trading post told him she'd passed through days ago, trading her necklace for medicine for a fevered child. That was how he knew it was her. She'd always given more than she owned. He stood under the eaves of the post, turning the beaded strand over in his palm. The colors had faded, but her warmth clung to it still, faint as breath. He wondered if she ever thought of him, or if she'd simply folded his kindness away like a story too heavy to carry. The nights grew colder. He started talking to her absence, telling it things he couldn't say when she was near, that he never meant to buy her, that he only wanted to see her stand free. The wind gave no answer, only pushed him onward. Somewhere between loneliness and prayer, he realized he wasn't searching for her to bring her back. He was searching because without her, he didn't know what forgiveness looked like anymore. When he found her, it wasn't in the way he imagined. No grand reunion, no blazing sunrise. Just a small camp beside the river, a dying fire, and a woman bent over a boiling pot of herbs. She turned slowly, rain dripping from her lashes, and for a heartbeat neither spoke. Then she straightened, face calm but cautious, like someone waking into a dream they no longer trust. Her hair was shorter now, uneven where she'd cut it herself. The lines around her eyes had deepened, not from age but from the weight of miles. "You shouldn't have followed," she said softly. Her voice held neither anger nor welcome, only fatigue. "I didn't mean to," he replied, and it was the truth. For a while they stood under the storm's breath, the river swollen and loud beside them. Then she turned away and tended the fire, motioning for him to sit. He did, every motion deliberate, as if afraid to break the fragile peace between them. The smell of smoke and wet earth hung heavy. She poured him a cup of something bitter and warm. He drank without asking. "I heard about the child," he said at last. "The one you helped." Her eyes flickered, and a small, tired smile ghosted across her lips. "The fever broke," she murmured. "That's enough." He studied her in the firelight. She looked smaller somehow, not weaker, just distilled, like all her softness had been boiled down to steel. "You didn't have to go," he said. She shook her head. "You bought my freedom, Luke. That was mercy enough. But staying there, I would have been a shadow in your house. A kindness mistaken for chains." Her words landed like rain against an open wound. He wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Instead, he said quietly, "Then let me walk beside you. No debts. No promises. Just miles." For the first time, her gaze softened. She didn't answer, but when the thunder cracked again, she handed him a blanket. They sat close, shoulders nearly touching, their silence fuller than any confession. The night stretched long, stitched together by the rhythm of rain and river. By morning, the storm had spent itself. Mist curled over the water, and a pale light broke through the clouds. She stood, brushing mud from her dress, and looked at the horizon. "The world won't forgive easily," she said. He rose beside her. "Then we'll forgive it ourselves." Something in her posture eased. She reached out, hesitating, then let her hand rest against his. It wasn't surrender, not even agreement, just a small bridge built of understanding. They began walking, step for step, toward the road that wound through the valley. By midday, the river gleamed behind them, carrying a tangle of weeds and an old length of rusted chain downstream. The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of her lullaby once more. Luke glanced at her, but she didn't sing aloud this time. She only smiled faintly, as if hearing it too. When the town came into view again, he noticed figures gathered at the ridge. The sheriff, the preacher, others who had once watched her in silence. Their faces were pale against the brightening sky. She slowed, but didn't stop. The world seemed to hold its breath. He took off his hat, holding it to his chest, as though the gesture itself could shield her from their judgment. Her hand slipped from his, but not in fear. She stepped forward alone, chin high, sunlight catching the damp strands of her hair. In that instant, she looked untouchable, like the dawn they had both been chasing finally stood before them. Then the bell from the old church tower rang across the town, sharp and sudden, breaking the stillness. She turned to him once, eyes wide, not with dread, but with knowing. Something had shifted in the air, the promise of an ending neither of them could yet name. The sound faded, leaving only the whisper of wind and the echo of her song, lingering like a heartbeat that refused to die.